Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the Rule 34 podcast. I'm your host, Jack, joined by my fellow co-hosts.
Um, I don't know, Dominic CC 59580 at berkeley.edu.
You always, give away so much information on these.
It's just an email, bro.
True, I guess.
They would need the password.
You never know with some people, man.
That's true. They could take a hold of my email and use me.
But, so, anyways, how have you been, man? It's been about a week.
I've been pretty good. Finals week is coming up. We got this week. I had a final, and we have next week a couple more finals left. This is pretty much home stretch for the end of this.
First year done, huh?
Wait, what?
Home stretch and then first year in the bag or in the books.
Yeah, pretty much. One whole year. I didn't even step one foot in the college.
Same.
That kind of. And I think what pisses me off the most about what happened, about transitioning to next year is that I believe we're going to be forced to go back into in-person classes.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think they're 100% accommodating for the students who are international and who have less resources to come back or don't have the appropriate amount of money to board a flight and then come here and then settle down in a dorm or something like that.
Mm.
And what's even worse is that last year, my tuition bill, the total tuition bill was around $36,000,
mm-hmm.
and thankfully it was all paid off. But I'm covering this year, they raised the price up to $38,000. So I'm wondering where did these $2,000 randomly come from?
Mm.
If we literally lost a bunch of resources, and I'm pretty sure a bunch of campus offices were shut down, or they had to be remote. Where did just $2,000 just pop out from?
Yeah,
that's what I hate about the tuition stuff, because it always raises up. There's no way it could come down because they always want more money out of all the students.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah,
I think the hardest part is going to have to re-transition into in-person schooling.
That's true, yeah.
Especially because of how big the campuses are. It's going to be, and especially because we didn't have a tour or anything or get to learn the campus, so it's going to be difficult to know where our classes are.
Yeah. But I think what also sucks more is the social aspect, because your first year is meant to be the year where you make friends, where you meet new people. But that, that's kind of how do you say, it's been alternated now that everything's online. Mm-hmm. And now that you have to come back in person, people might, or maybe not, might struggle trying to socialize, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Especially to the people who are introverts and stuff like that, who just stayed at home the whole day and stuff, But I just think that the transition is going to be more difficult, only because we were about to get used to going in person before the pandemic, as we were, because if compared to last year, when I was accepted to Berkeley and I wanted to go in person dorm, I was heck yes, I'm gonna do this in person. But ever since we all got accommodate at home with the Zoom stuff, I simply had to open up my computer and just begin my classes like that. It's gonna be harder for me. Well, for me personally, to adapt to going into person to a class, attending discussion sections and then doing my own thing.
Yeah, the discussion sections are going to be the biggest, confusing thing to me. Because, you said one time, is it something where, in the middle of the class we branch off into those? Or is it something how I said, you have to go back for it, which can be difficult for students who, live a far distance away?
Yeah.
Because if it means you have to go back at a later time, and for the most part, the most discussions are later in the day, it means that someone like me is probably gonna have to spend my whole day on campus instead of like maybe finding a way to go home once my day is over.
Right.
But I guess this will all be questions that are answered for us next year, as I think both our schools are heading back towards in-person schooling.
Yeah. Did UCLA say anything about like having those like large classes being held, like those 300, 400 student like large theater classes?
No clue.
No clue. Because I believe for Berkeley they said they're allowing for limited in-person classes, but like for like 30 to 40 students. But they're not going to be holding like those 400, 500 student classes because obviously they don't want to risk anything. What else? I think what also sucks is that people won't be able to like discover the universities the way it was before the pandemic hit, in terms of like discovering like restaurants to eat at, maybe like bookstores to read, check out books at, because the majority of them have probably closed down. What I know at Berkeley, like the majority of restaurants that surrounded Berkeley closed down, unfortunately, because of the pandemic. So students that want to go try out eat a new food or some sort of new restaurant with their friends after school won't be able to do it because, well, they can't. They're gonna have to rely on takeout food, or what do you call it? The school food.
Yeah.
Like that. And so, and any other sort of activities that activity section that was also closed down.
Yeah.
So I'm not 100% sure if it's worth it to go back in person, or would you want to go back in person upcoming this fall semester?
Maybe. I don't know. It's a difficult thing. It's really gonna be weird going from online schooling to in-person schooling once again.
Right. I think it's mostly about the availability for the student. Like if they're available and if they're able to afford it. First and foremost, being able to afford it is the most important part. In being on a school campus, within a dorm. But for like the international students, I'm not even sure if they can make it because they're stuck at home. They might not be able to afford it, or they might not be able to accommodate, a flight to fly out to the universities if it's far away or in a different continent. I don't know, man. I just feel like we should wait a bit longer until everyone's able to have access to a vaccine. And then afterwards, maybe during spring 2022. Yeah, spring 2022. See if it's possible that everyone is able to go back on campus and then have like those large classes, if possible.
Yeah, I get you. Well, only time will tell, honestly. All I know is it's going to be very difficult, as we've seen with college lately.
True.
Any other interesting news before I introduce our topic?
What else happened today? I'm not sure if I already said this before, but for some random reason, Berkeley just decided to hand out $1,400 just for free. Not only that, but they're gonna give out another free check for like Berkeley students because of like COVID relief. But that's the thing though. The next day, I received a letter from Berkeley for like a donation, like in order to donate, if that makes sense. Like to donate to like support buildings, support causes, support like offices and like other activities. And I'm wondering, like, they're giving out this free money, yet they're asking for money back. But then again, they're asking for money from the students when we were already paying thousands of dollars towards them. You get what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
They're asking for more money when a bunch of students are already in debt trying to pay off what they owe.
Money.
Zero.
That's all. I don't know what to say to that, but that's quite funny.
Pretty ironic.
Any other news?
Any other news? I mean, I don't think anything crazy has gone on during the past week.
Yeah, it's been kind of slow.
What happened?
It's been kind of slow.
It's been pretty slow, yeah. I believe there's a new what was it? Like a construction project happening in the Arts District of Los Angeles here in downtown. But there's been a lot of controversy over that. Like that's the thing though. It's a privatized investment of like $2 billion.
Damn.
And they want to completely change the Arts District. And as we know, the Arts District looks, kind of bad with like the current situation in terms of like the homelessness, the rundown buildings, and like the overall shape of it just seems pretty in a bad state. And like the rendered images make it look like this huge, like super like Silicon Valley type of landscape. And people are gonna think like, what's the point of it? People won't be able to afford the buildings.
Yeah.
And then what's gonna happen to the homeless people because they're gonna have to be run out. We have to be pushed out.
Yeah, I get you.
And
gentrification.
Yeah. Gentrification, that's the word.
Well, yeah. So before we move on to today's topic, two things I want to say that I'll just mention now because I don't think there would be a point in time that I'd mention them otherwise. It's been about a month since I started One Piece, and I'm already I'm 80 episodes in, about to get to 100.
Jeez. And
the NFL draft happened yesterday, and as an Eagles fan, I can say I am happy with our pick, and I'm glad this is the first time you will ever hear me say this. I'm glad that the Cowboys decided to team up with us in screwing over another division rival in the Giants.
Hey, that's cooperation, man.
See, let me explain this real quick before we get in today's topic. So, in football, there's divisions, right, where each team are placed, right, Dom?
Right.
So, in the NFC East, there's the Eagles, the Cowboys, the now known Washington football team, and the New York Giants.
Okay.
Now, it really doesn't make sense that 3 of those teams are on the East and then one of them's all the way down in Texas. But that's just how the divisions are made, especially because for this division, all 4 teams have a rivalry with one another, so they wanted to keep them in the same division.
Right.
So, I'm not even lying when I say this. Legit blood has been spilled within this division over their rivalries. And I would say probably one of the most, really hateful rivalries winning is the Eagles and Cowboys. There have been multiple times where they've, in this draft, traded up ahead of one another to pick a player that they knew the other team was going to want. And so, in this draft, they knew that the Giants wanted a player. And so, because one of the players that had already gone the Cowboys wanted, they decided, we'll probably trade back. And so, the Eagles decided they wanted to trade up to try and pick the player that the Giants wanted.
Right.
And so the 2 teams basically just agreed to screw over the Giants here. And once the Eagles made their pick, the Giants literally traded back in the draft because they had no one they wanted to pick at that point.
Right. Oh.
Very interesting rivalry stuff. And speaking of competition, today's topic, Dom. Are video games getting too repetitive?
Too repetitive, eh?
In my opinion, yes. Because I think we mentioned at the end of last episode how you're just constantly seeing rehashes of game where each year there has to be a new version that comes out.
Yeah, true.
You see it with the Call of Duty games, you see it with the sports games like Madden and 2K and FIFA, where it's essentially just copy-paste of last year, throw in maybe some new feature to make it look like it's all new, show supposedly better graphics and stuff, and boom, everyone's gonna go out and buy it because it's new and stuff.
You have a point, yeah. I feel like okay. So I think in terms of like gameplay, a lot of the games do indeed repeat themselves. But I feel like they do try to innovate upon some things. Like the comparison between like Black Ops 4 to Modern Warfare of 2019. That was a huge difference. Like in terms of like what do you call it? The gameplay aspect, how you control the character, how how you control their aim and stuff like that. But you do have a point when it comes to like the overall aspect of the game, because at the end of the day, you're just shooting a bad guy, or you're capturing a point from the bad guys, or you're trying to just get the highest amount of kills, which has been the same formula ever since what the first Call of Duty back in 1999.
I think so.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's the same thing with like racing games, where it's the only difference is just the licenses people and companies have, and like the amount of customization. How do you call it? And like and what's worse is when it comes to the money schemes, such as with FIFA and NBA, when they try to simply add in like some sort of like loot box implementation just so they could extract extra money from the players.
Yeah, and my biggest thing is like the gaming industry needs to start prioritizing quality over quantity.
Yeah.
There's too much worry about putting out a new game each year instead of taking their time not only to develop the new game, but put like distance between each release.
Right. Yeah.
Like it's not that big of a difference, but Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2 had a 2-year difference in their release. GTA 4 and 5 had a 5-year difference between their release. You know?
Yeah.
And like when you think about like games that have taken so long to develop and actually like work because they took their time to develop, Nier Automata took about 3 years. It had like 3 years in development before it was released. Persona 5 had about 6 years. The Final Fantasy remake had about 5 years. The original Final Fantasy was in development for like 3 years. So it's like they're taking their time to really like in a way perfect these games,
Right. But then again, it's not always about time. That's like the most essential part. For example, Cyberpunk 2077. It had 8 years. I think I might be wrong, but I feel like that's like the longest game that's ever been developed for. No, it's games coming out December.
Yeah, but I think that's a point where you gotta find a balance, because if it was like stuck in development for 8 years, you look at the whole thing of if you're stuck in development for that long, you're kind of taking your legs out from beneath you, because if you're spending that long, most of the part, like who's to say a new system doesn't come out, which is probably what happened to Cyberpunk,
True.
Where a new system came out, so then they had to switch gears into developing the game for that new system. And then while that was happening, look what happened. The PS5 came out, so they had to come out with another, like trying to develop it so it would also work for that gaming system and like other gaming systems as well. And so like you kind of take your legs out from beneath, because you want to take your time, but you don't want to take too long where it ends up coming out like outdated in a sense,
Right.
I've heard of a couple games where that's happened, but I can't name them off the top of my head right now. But where by the time they implement something, like it's already like outdated in comparison.
Right. True. You get a point. And like I want to bring upon a different question. And like, do you truly believe that quality is more important than quantity in terms of a game's success?
Yes,
because like,
and no.
Right.
Because it all depends on the series, in my opinion.
Right.
But also at the same time, if it has enough hype to it, then it doesn't matter. Because look at the Call of Duty games. No matter what anyone wants to argue and say, like about like when they see the new game like trailer and stuff at like these big events and how they don't think it's gonna compare, they still all go out and pre-order and wait in lines to get the new game every year.
True.
Same with sports games like Madden and 2K. They still go out every single year, pay a full $60 for what is essentially a rehash.
Agreed.
So, like, as far as the success, both part, I don't think it matters because they're gonna get their money one way or another.
Yeah.
But,
I think what's also
but like in terms of quality, I think that should matter most because, like, as some of the games I mentioned with how long they took in development, they became huge successes. Now the only difference in the games I listed though is that they're not really multiplayer games; they're more solo. They're more solo player games, one player games.
Right.
Which is why I think you can say those don't get as repetitive because, they can at least take their time to develop, stories and intricate, like, gameplay versus where multiplayer games, I think, are more focused, as I mentioned, putting out a new game every year and stuff like that.
Yeah. Agreed. What was we gonna say? What was I gonna say? In terms of like quality games, would you compare a game such as Nier Automata to Among Us?
No.
This sounds like a stupid question, but you got to think about it. Nier Automata was in the game development for like 3 years, as you said, but it's like one of the most beautiful games in terms of like story wise and like the actual details in terms of the how do you call it? The character models, the landscape, and stuff like that. But compare that to Among Us, which is like a game that can be made in less than 2 months, has literally the most simplest cartoonish characters, and hasn't been updated in more than 2 years. Yet it probably had one of the most highest, how do you call it, popularity, numbers for the past year and a half.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes you think, you can make such a beautiful game with beautiful characters, and yet a simple little spaceman beats you.
Well, because here's the thing I would say about Among Us. Honestly, its whole, its base, idea for what the game isn't, some new mind-blowing, idea that no one's ever done before.
Right.
But, this is going to sound weird saying, but, in terms of quality, it's essentially on the same level as Nier because, now they've obviously added more people, but for the past 2 years, for a 3-person dev team, they put in the work for this game, and as you mentioned, when they started popping off, they reached record numbers. They didn't just essentially try and let the game die because they were like, 2 years and now it's getting popular, what's the point? Because if people know, they were planning on coming out with an Among Us 2.
Oh yeah,
but because of how popular the game became, this ties back to the whole quality over quantity. They went back and started focusing on the game itself and tweaking it and trying to fix its performance, trying to make it so that the servers could handle the amount of people that were trying to play each day. They started trying to add new stuff for people. They started working in development for a new map, So they started focusing on the quality of the game rather than trying to just put out a new one that might have had the same issues.
Agreed.
Which is why they even said they were no longer going to be doing Among Us 2 and instead put their sole focus on Among Us due to how popular it is.
True.
Very much like a lot of solo player games where they focus on the one game so that it's good at launch and throughout its lifetime, so that by the time it starts dying down, that's when they introduce the new game that they've been developing for a while.
Right.
It's been 3 years since Nier Automata came out in 2017, and just now they're coming out with the remake for Nier Replicant.
That's the prequel or the first game, right? Or am I wrong?
I don't know if it's the first, but it definitely came before Nier Automata.
Yeah.
So I think I don't know if it's necessarily a prequel to that game, but it came before. So yeah, they came out with a remake for it,
Right.
And Nier Automata is still very popular to this day, but obviously it's not peak popularity. So it's this is where they come in with near replicant remake, years down the line, rather than have done it like a year after.
True.
Because the issue you get is because of this whole thing where you're putting out yearly games, you've essentially cut off the timeline or not the timeline, but the lifeline of a game's popularity. Like look at a game like the sports games. They come out. Some of them come out like what, summer, maybe fall, and they go and essentially almost follows the pattern of the season. Like the Madden games will usually die around December, or like once the Super Bowl's finished in February, it kind of dies down because then it's like, well, there's not really much content for them to put in the game because season's over. What are they gonna do? So it kind of dies around there, and you get this period where from February till the summer, everyone's just waiting for the next game.
Right.
And so you're essentially cutting your lifetime short for each of these games, especially the sports games and even the COD ones, where because people are so used to getting a new one so soon, they think the one they're currently playing is getting repetitive and they just want a new one. Versus, like going back to the BO1, BO2 argument, how many years did those two games really do really well and, essentially didn't really die. Like, I don't know if you remember, but I think it was either of one of the, I think it was Advanced Warfare or Ghosts had came out, and everyone played it for like about a month, and then everyone just the game died because everyone went back to BO2 because they preferred how much better that game was in terms of quality.
Yeah.
So, you'll see things like that, but end of the day, this whole thing is like cutting games lifespan short.
Right. Agreed.
And speaking, what were you gonna say?
No, I just wanted to bring upon the idea of, do you think that this right now where we're living in is the golden time for video games? Because I feel like, because I've been wondering what about the lifespan of video games? How far can NBA keep making NBAs and FIFA, and how many FIFAs can be made? Because there's no way that it's going to be, FIFA 50, FIFA 56, FIFA 57. You know what I'm saying?
They're probably gonna do it because of the fact that they just want money. But in the dream scenario, when it comes to sports games, the dream would be that they just come out with one singular game that constantly updates as the years go on, updating the rosters constantly rather than just, dish out $60 so you can get the new rosters.
Yeah, I feel like that's what they should do, is make one huge base game with all the players or all the events, just kind of like how Rainbow did it, right?
Yeah.
Rainbow didn't come with a sequel and a second sequel. No, it just stayed with one base game that stayed since 2016 and has been updating over time. Yeah. Same thing with like CS:GO. There was CS:GO Source, and then Global Offensive came out, but it stayed on Global Offensive. They didn't want to move out.
Yeah.
And that's what you said. The dream should be that they should create one huge game that they'll be able to settle on, and maybe make another game 6 or 7 years down later. But that means they don't have to worry about having to create an entirely new IP or an entirely new whole project just so they can get a bit more extra revenue.
Yeah. And with about 15 minutes left, I want to go into a kind of side part of this whole question, and that is the competitive scene of games. Do you honestly believe this has caused a lot of games to not necessarily become repetitive, but got into the point where tying into the repetitiveness, games, because of how copy pastes are, but obviously seem less fun because of how copy pasted they are. But now tying the competitive scene to it, do you think the competitive scene has somewhat in a way made games less fun and less interesting?
I would say yes, but to a certain group of people. Most notably, the people who would feel like the games would be ruined is people who mostly play casual, compared to people who would literally play competitive. Not for fun, but just to literally be competitive. For example, Overwatch. at times, what do you call it? Overwatch was like a casual game. People had fun playing it, but once the competitive scene started settling in, back in 2018, 2017, 2018, like people just simply started beginning to take the game more seriously, and thus making the game more less fun because people would get angry that their team lost or that they lost the match or the round. And over time, Overwatch simply became a game to, rack up kills as fast as possible, or get revenge on the enemy who killed you first. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and a lot of people would just, of course, the immediate argument, the good players turn to, or good in quotation marks, is just get good at the game. But not everyone's trying to be a pro player and try their butts off in a game. Some people simply just want to play the video games for fun, and that can't happen when everyone's, sweating in the game, thinking that some pro team is watching them and gonna sign them to a contract just because they freaking got the most kills in the game.
Yeah.
And it's oh, you're just mad everyone else is better than you at the game. I couldn't care less if some gremlin who spends 20 hours a day on some game is better than me. What I do care about is having fun with my friends, and when you can't even do that in a game anymore, what's the point? Right. Especially when games like Rainbow and Overwatch add separate modes for the competitive players, known as ranked and competitive in their games respectively. It's pointless when they add those modes, and yet still in the casual game modes, people are still trying their hardest, thinking it's a competitive game.
True.
And it isn't even just a thing of just trying to be competitive, it's people being hyper competitive, to the point where you can't even get into a game and enjoy your time, because as soon as you get into a game, everyone's trying all this and stuff, and you can't even simply try and have any fun with your friends.
True. But I think what also... Wait, huh?
Continue.
I was going to say, I think it also depends on what game you're playing. For example, for Rainbow, a game that's a tactical shooter where you're supposed to, play slowly, or try to play in a situational, environment where you're expected to act quickly, right? Mm-hmm. I think Rainbow, and again, Modern Warfare, where it's super fast paced. I'm not sure if you're meant to have a good time. If that makes sense.
You can still try.
If you can still try, yes, but I'm not. How do you say it? Because Rainbow, it's meant to be. You're supposed to take your time, watch your corners, and if you get shot from behind, you get shot from behind, right?
Yeah, and it's realistic for the most part.
Yeah, it's meant to be. Yeah, exactly. So, but it's supposed to be sort of realistic. It's an arcade, but it's supposed to be realistic.
But the fun aspect comes in the fact that each operator has their own unique kits, and a lot of those can be used in different ways. You have Sledge with his sledgehammer that can be... how many people have run memes where they try and kill someone with the sledgehammer? Maverick with his blowtorch, they try and do the same thing, Different... basically different shots to try and make the game fun, which is what casual is for,
Right.
You can go try and, do your hardest and all this and, focus and play the game how it's meant to be, in rank. Go ahead. But in the casual place... people are just trying to play for fun, they're not trying to focus on all that, And what made it worse to me, because I get it, everyone has a different definition of fun, but what made it worse to me was when every game, now and before, just had to start basing their games off the pro scene alone. When it came to patches and updates, when they were making adjustments to character, it was all based on what the pro scene needed, what the pro players wanted, in Siege... they only really focused on what the pro players were wanting. Basically the issue here is they're focusing on their pro and competitive scene and just saying whatever to the casual fan base. They don't care what the casual fan base wants.
Right.
And you've seen it, where they do all these different things where they basically just appeal to their pro scene, their competitive scene. Why? Because it's making them money. And they do it all for that, and then the casual players, as you mentioned, are just kind of left here and just well, what are we supposed to do? You're making this game all in this, and like it's ruining it for the people down here who are just trying to play the game casually.
True.
And like you're just left with solo games at that point. And solo games aren't fun because you can't enjoy the experience with your friends, especially because it's like, oh, well, why don't you guys play a solo game like at the same time? Yeah, but everyone moves at a different pace.
Right.
One friend might be putting in 5 hours to a game while you're only able to put like 2.
True.
And like to really like focus in on this, I think there's like 3 games that just deserve to get a finger pointed at them. One is COD and sports games, and I think they get the finger pointed at them because they started this whole thing of rinse, wash, repeat when it came to producing games, you know?
Yeah.
And this whole thing of new game every year, basically the same thing, barely anything new, you know, stuff like that. And COD kind of for the whole thing of the competitive scene a bit. Because COD was really one of the first games to really start popping the competitive scene off compared to other games, you know? And
right.
This is going to sound like super salty, but I think you might agree with me here. The one game that also deserves to get the finger pointed at them is Fortnite.
Fortnite, oh, okay, yeah.
Because they started this whole thing of now every game has to either be or include Battle Royale. And because of how big it got and how big like the pro/competitive scene and all the tournaments they had for that game, that's what started causing everyone to get like hyper competitive, thinking they were going to make millions off of it, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, you got a point about that, yeah.
Like, those are just the 3 games that I'd look at as really pointing the finger at what caused this whole issue in the gaming world as of right now.
I feel like other games that have done so are the older generation of games, like Quake, League of Legends, Dota. Like these are the sort of, I think those were like the sort of games that like pushed, especially Quake. Like Quake tournament. I think I'm pretty sure that's what the game was. It was a game that was not meant to be taken casually and like super competitively. I'm pretty sure like tournaments happened back then. Like the first month the game came out, tournaments like started sprouting out like crazy, like for like money pool prizes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like that sparked like the competitive edge people had beginning of first game, especially League of Legends as well. Games like League of Legends aren't taken. Like they have like a casual and a ranked mode. But even in a regular casual match, people get toxic because people want to play competitively and they want to win the game.
Yeah, and
so I feel like those games those games are like super competitive.
Yeah, and like I think that's the main point we're trying to get here is that we're not saying that you can't be competitive at a game. The main issue here is the hyper competitiveness where it starts causing people to be toxic to one another. Where arguments start sprouting just because of the fact that someone died or the team lost the game, and people are out here yelling and throwing death threats at one another,
Yeah.
Like that's the big thing. Which is what you see a lot in competitive scenes now. It's not even just a thing of just trying to be competitive and compete with one another, like friendly competition, It's a thing where it's just gone completely toxic. And in a way, you kind of got to blame the ones who are running the pro scenes for not holding this stuff accountable and checking it in a sense.
Yeah.
Like they just allow this to happen because it makes them money, gets them views.
Pretty much. I feel like the casual. It's even worse with the casual modes for games, because then people they're Smurfs, and people who don't know who Smurfs are people who have the competitive edge in games, like with the competitive skill, and use like fake or like burner like low level accounts just so they could, I don't know, get easy kills on lower skilled players.
Yeah,
which makes it even worse for casual gameplay.
Yeah, just that was the whole. That's another thing to emphasize with the whole thing of taking the fun out of casual, when everyone else is just trying to have fun. Let me throw out this comparison. It's like if at a pickup game at a park, you just have 6 people or like about 6 people just trying to play basketball for fun with their friends, and out comes prime Michael Jordan to just drop like 100 points on them. It's like, how is that fun? You're taking someone with a higher skill base and just dropping them in a lower skill base.
Exactly.
And you look at the people who do that, and you're just like, how is that even fun to you? Like I said, people got different definitions of fun, but how is that fun to you? You're ruining everyone else's fun because everyone's just trying to have a good time, try and relax, have fun with their friends. And now here you come treating it like, in the basketball comparison, like you're out here thinking it's game 7 of the finals, that you're going to get some huge bonus for winning a championship, and that, like that all this is on the line,
Right.
Like, people are just trying to have fun, but they can't, and this, end of the day, this ties back to our comparison episode on Rainbow and Overwatch when we compared the two and how, like, what happened with their competitive scenes, Nowadays, the multiplayer games are simply just forgetting the casual side in favor of their competitive side because the competitive division is making them the money.
Right.
The casual side is getting the money in their wallets from buying the game, but the competitive one is making them the money when they're doing these tournaments and raising exposure for the game and all this stuff,
True.
So, I don't know. End of the day, all you can do is kind of hope for some type of change, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly feel like there's not going to be a change because they understand that the competitive scene and like microtransaction give them the most amount of money.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, that's all it goes down to is money.
Yeah. And so I don't think they're going to want to make some sort of like pro-consumer friendly move.
Yeah.
Just to accommodate for the lower level players or the players who won't take the game seriously or who just simply want to have fun. They just want to resort to the ones who want to take it seriously, just so they could be seen as like pro-consumer, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I feel like one game, like completely, how do you call it, demolishes this whole idea is GTA.
Mm.
The only reason why I say that is because GTA doesn't have any skill-based matchmaking. A level 300 player or a level 500 player can be matched up with a level 2 player who barely just bought the game. And there's like implementations where the lower level players can be given like a 1-up or like a chance to like redeem themselves if they get killed in the game, or they're able to receive like a way to like become invincible if they feel like they're being abused by a different player, if that makes sense. On the spot. It's like options and like the option menu to be able to do that in an online game.
I'll stop you there with about 35 seconds left. We'll close out here. I've been your host, Jack, joined by my fellow co-host,
Dom.
I want to thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rule 34 podcast. As always, doors open for anyone who wants to join. And remember, if it exists, we have an opinion on it. Thank you all, and we'll see you all in the next episode.